Hello, good morning, Jean-Christophe, everyone. It is very strange to see yourself in a big screen, and I wish I could be there with you directly. I wish I could speak Italian, but that is the best we can do for now. Thank you very much. As Jean-Christophe said, I am a designer working in healthcare, and since 5 years, working in the life sciences, and I have to say that my working for Amgen, it is a biotech company of global reach, and I have to say that the views that I will share with you in this presentation are mine and do not represent those of my employer. So as a designer working in healthcare, I have had the experience of seeing how design can actually contribute to this transformation that Jean-Christophe was referring to before, and from different perspectives, in different positions of responsibility. So I was very grateful to receive this invitation from Jean-Christophe and the Círculo de Design to basically share my reflections on the topic. It won't be a theoretical exchange. It will be rather an account of the experiences as someone in the field. Just let me see if this works. Yes. So let's think about the context a little bit. I mean, the basic elements of it have been outlined by our previous speakers, and basically the healthcare is a system in flux. We have a technological revolution going on. Healthcare has been very slow to adopt things like artificial intelligence or even the digitalization of service. However, this is coming up very quickly. And also we have trends like users and citizens are more and more empowered to exercise their rights and demand good healthcare services. There is a more distributed approach to care. So there are things which impact we are only starting to grasp now. So because change, as you know, is exponential, but as humans, we're only able to see the change in incremental pieces, in a linear way, right? So it's coming at us. Another important aspect of healthcare, a context, is that there is a feeling of urgency to change. And systemic challenges demand new ways to collaborate. So it's very good that, for instance, new treatments are transforming diseases from previously fatal diseases to chronic conditions. We are living more. We have more life expectations. And that means that comes with a lot of cost pressure on healthcare systems. So there is a new emphasis on actually having an impact, demonstrating results. And I want to share with you a framework which is quite transformational in my view, which is value-based healthcare. The premise is very simple. Basically, in order for a solution or an intervention to be sort of reimbursed or supported, it needs to demonstrate value. And value it's either improving people's lives, having an outcome, or decreasing the cost. That is simple, right? Sounds very simple. However, it represents a massive shift in how we think about how we contribute value to different players. Think about the life sciences, for instance. Traditionally, a new therapy was developed. Its efficiency, its impact in clinical aspects was demonstrated in clinical trials. There is enough evidence. At some point, it got approved and it got sort of reimbursed. That means from then on, the manufacturer only needs to focus on actually selling the medication, right? You sell the medication, you get your money, the business goes on. However, in a value-based healthcare approach, what happens is that actually you're going to be, the demand is that you actually have a true impact in the real world, outside of the bubble of a clinical trial. The implication is big because then this player, this manufacturer, whomever, actually needs to partner and start caring about all the problems that are here and there and are in the way of patients actually getting the best benefit of this medication. Are patients understanding the medication? Do they know how to apply it? Do they have a good diagnosis to get that medication? Do they talk to their clinician in the right way? So we become and these things cannot be looked at just by one organization. We need to partner up. We need to partner up and look at those things. So that means a whole new world of collaborating, partnering, and a whole new mindset. So a lot of good healthcare innovation is happening in this new space of that is also about changing mindsets. Another thing that I need to bring up is how COVID-19 has really been a revolution, a shock for all our lives, but particularly in healthcare. What we see is actually that it has accelerated the trends that were there before in any case. So it has accelerated the demand for patient autonomy, actually patient being able to manage their conditions or manage their rehabilitations in an autonomous way, remotely, without having to go to hospitals. In that sense, digitalization, virtual medicine have been accelerated. It really exploded. Every hospital has their telemedicine solution right nowadays, and also has a sped up, as mentioned, they bring in care away from hospitals, more closer to the patient. Also, what COVID-19 has done is kind of had laid bare the failures, the vulnerabilities in our system in terms of social, economical. We know that depending on the socio-economical background of a patient, the outcomes are different, and that should not be, right? This has become obvious with the pandemic. And so there is a new focus on citizen empowerment and a focus on equality in how we do healthcare innovation. We are not designing just for a user, we're designing for an ecosystem, and we're designing for a population. So in that context, with all these big transformation going on, what is the role of design, of particularly human-centered design? I would like to kind of give you a few reflections, and in three levels, right? Design as a skill is a set of methods to create solutions, be it communication services, devices, apps, that actually address a need for a patient, for someone else in the system, and have a good impact. At a slightly deeper level, I would like to talk about what it means to go through the process of human-centered design. That in itself is transformative. And we'd like to talk specifically about co-creation and the experience of that. And thirdly, a few thoughts about, applying design, human-centered design as an approach. This a little bit more detached of the traditional expressions of design in terms of its objects and the artifacts it creates. It's very much a way to do things, a way to think about things in a patient-centric way, away from this traditional realm. We are thinking about drug development, for instance. So the expression, so when we move from left to right, actually we need designers, human-centered design need to confront itself with different disciplines and really hybridate deeply and challenge their own method. Still, it's an interesting process to observe. I would like to share a few thoughts with you about this. So, well, first of all, I'm not being groundbreaking to say human-centered design as a skill is about problem solving and problem finding. Well, a lot of what's happening in healthcare innovation is technology driven, right? We do things because we can do them. We put apps out there, and in many cases, I mean, and because there is so much potential for data solutions, predictive algorithms, to really offer so much value, right? But very often we start this effort with a solution, and so the value of design, of designers in this process, is as simple as being the guys that quietly ask, who on earth would need this? Who on earth would want this? And this is actually a very important value. So we are able to look at things, look at problems, and deconstruct all the assumptions that we bring onto the table, because there are many and we need to challenge them. And this is about creating things that they make sense, they address a need, they are useful, and they have an impact, right? Let me give you an example to illustrate this. 5 years ago, there was this professor, Ethan Bash, that published a study with his team on the impact of EPRO solutions in the treatment of cancer. EPRO means electronic patient-reported outcome solutions. That means that the patient had to monitor his or her symptoms or some of the variables regularly through an app and during their therapeutic process. And he was able to demonstrate that actually just by doing that, just by sharing, by monitoring these symptoms, the positive impact in quality of life, adherence to their medications, and importantly, survival was big. 5 months in overall survival in average. That was groundbreaking. Because just by putting this simple thing, this simple app in their hands, they would, in average, they were demonstrating improvements that were comparable to those of a new medication that cost bazillions to develop. So that was a frenzy of EPRO solutions everywhere. So they were pushed to patients to monitor themselves. And basically, they are here to stay, these solutions. And they have revolutionized the way we do clinical trials, for instance. But actually, when it comes to the day-to-day care, routine care, we see that they are not highly adopted, really. So we had the occasion at some point to look into launching a solution for symptom monitoring in the realm of patients with multiple myeloma, which is a bone marrow disease. And actually, we work with Experiencia for this piece of work. We were looking at considering launching this solution and offering it not just in a clinical trial, but beyond for standard care. And so it was an important investment. We had to look into, is it worth it, right? So we, designers, were asked to look into, does it make sense for patients? Simple question, right? So we set out to investigate what actually was the value of monitoring symptoms. Actually look into what are the needs of patients in managing daily life with this disease, which has massive impact on fatigue, levels of energy, pain, and many other things, right? So what it is that we can do to improve that day-to-day management. And we were able to see what was important. And what was important was mostly being able to communicate with the healthcare team, being able to learn about their patterns so that they can manage better in their day-to-day. So we were able to reframe, reframe the initial question from how can we help patients monitor their symptoms with a digital solution to how can we best support patients feel connected to the teams, best prepare for the consultation with the oncologist, which is kind of a big deal. Learn about their condition and manage it in the day-to-day. So we move from a mindset to data extractiveness, like we want to get all the data we can from patients, to a mindset of data empowerment. Actually, these can provide real value to patients. And this is what a human-centered design approach can do. It can be valuable to combine different value propositions. EPRO solutions are great for providers. They are great for hospitals. It's a source of insight, a source of data to understand how patients are doing beyond their doors, right? but what is the value for patients? Monitoring myself to death is actually not valuable for me. There needs to be something else. There needs to be a real value that I get out of this experience, out of this process. And by applying human-centered design lenses, we were able to see how to best shape solutions that actually cater for different needs and value propositions in the system. So let's moving on. Let me talk about a different aspect of human-centered design. And as I mentioned before, the experience of co-creation. So that can be transformative. So human-centered design is iterative. So it's about trying things out, testing them, improving them, doing that process with different people, with different voices that come into that are important to a certain specific problem. So why is it so important in the healthcare space? Because healthcare space is a complex ecosystem. We have, of course, the patients, their caregivers. We have a multitude of healthcare professionals. We have GPs, general practitioners. We have specialists. We have nurses, different types of nurses. And so on top of that, flying around, we have our payers, we have our providers, we have the institutions, and they all have a voice. So by engage this participatory design and co-creation in design, we can do is methodically create a space for all these voices to be heard, because it's very easy to not do that. I like to highlight one specific thing about the value of co-creation, very concretely, and it's critical decision making. I'll give you an example of a solution that we have working on for a long time now, and it is on the cardiovascular space. So the reality is that a lot of people, 1 million people, are suffering from a heart attack each year in Europe. And without the right support, many will fail to improve their lifestyle, and way too many will come back within 2 years with another heart attack or another event. So it is huge. It's a healthcare, it's a societal issue. So a few different agents, different hospitals, payers, and we got together to think about that and how to address that situation and actually look at the problem from the perspective of patient. And we integrated patients post-MI in the process of creating and thinking about the problem. And one of the important things that actually surfaced was that after a heart attack, people are paralyzed with fear. And that makes them isolate themselves, not engage, not being able to change their life, even for people who are supported by family. So one of the key aspects, non-negotiable aspects, when we wanted to develop a solution or something, was to keep the human connection. Whatever we did. In the world of digital solutions, artificial intelligence, and bots, the thing we needed to maintain was someone to talk to throughout the process. So we set out to create what is now a new remote rehabilitation program that is launched in one hospital in the Netherlands, and several will be soon in Spain. And it's basically a digital, no digital, so hybrid service to support patients for a year. But what at its core this system is a choreography of interactions between the patient, between a person that has suffered from a heart attack, and someone else that helps him or her feel more motivated and sort of build the strength to improve the lifestyle. And that's at its core. So if having patients in the process, in our co-creation sessions, in our research, actually made it possible for this requirement to stay in the design of the solution. And that got us into a lot of complexity, because having to shape a role, having to integrate in the care pathway, it calls for a certain level of complexity in the development, in the co-creation, etc. And we had to defend it, to defend it with funding, with presentation, with actually making it live. And that the presence of patients during that process actually made it possible, because actually it was a hard requirement in the solution. So, and it was direct. Continuing with Rehab Plus, this solution that I am talking about, another aspect I want to highlight about co-creation and participatory design is that actually it blurs the boundaries between designers and sort of users or enablers of a service. So when designing experiences, services, we're not designing a product that then it's going to be closed, finished, and then I give it to you for your use. Actually, the people who design and co-design an experience will be the people who are living it and offering it. And this is an example. These pictures are from the co-creation team in Zuiderland, our hospital in the Netherlands. This is a group of physiotherapists, psychologists, people who are working with patients in their rehabilitation. And they have owned the solution, they are developed it, and they will continue to advance it when the solution is running. So as designers, as the organism in charge of creating a solution, co-creation is about letting go of power and sharing the ownership of creating a solution. It's a different mindset, and it's transformative for everyone in the organization. So moving on, another aspect of human-centered design in the co-creation aspect of human-centered design is that these processes of co-creation help us evolve the role in healthcare. So we put an emphasis on relational care. So care that is not about this unidirectional interaction with a user, but rather the balance interaction of different people in the ecosystem. We have the patients, we have the caregivers, we have people working to provide a service, doctors, nurses, everybody. It's a balance. So, for instance, one aspect that is interesting is that patients are becoming more and more of a voice in healthcare design, in healthcare transformation. They are more and more organizing themselves to express their voice. And for instance, patient experts has become a very familiar person, agent in healthcare design. It's a person that has gone through an experience of disease, of specific events in his or her life, and then becomes involved in actually improving the lives of those that go through the same thing. And we, as designers in the healthcare space, need to look at those evolved roles and work with them in developing the solution. This, for instance, is Iñaki, the gentleman on the left, is a heart attack patient that is now a patient expert, supporting other patients in Spain in different hospitals. And we will probably have the chance to collaborate and expand, develop that program in the hands of patient experts. So this is a way that we can organically evolve the roles and the solutions we put in place. Another aspect I want to highlight about this perspective on healthcare as relational is an evolution of roles is caregivers. We acknowledge that a big part of the care work is provided informally by family, friends, spouses. And the informal caregiver is at the fringes of formal healthcare. And especially in the moments of transition, when a person comes from a hospital or is in those moments of change, the system relies heavily on the work of these people, right? So in 2006, we had there was a report by an American charity, and in the U.S. alone, the value of the work of informal caregivers was dimensioned in $354 billion with B dollars. So just to have a little bit of an idea of what is being done without little acknowledgement. And that doesn't start to cut the dimension of that contribution. You can see here is a lady, Christina is a lady that takes care of her husband, who has a rare blood disease, and requires a dialysis at home twice. So her day, we had the opportunity to spend time with him and her, importantly, and taking a look at her day. She basically says, I go to the gym in the mornings, and that's it. Basically, the rest of the day is taken by the dialysis, they taking care of him, etc. That is something that is not accounted for. So we are. How can we better support informal caregivers? How can we include their needs, their challenges in the design of services, and in balancing the power in these healthcare ecosystems? That is, we don't do a good job at that. That is where sometimes human-centered design has an angle of activism, and people like the Care Lab and others to really highlight the importance of taking this value into account and addressing the needs of informal caregivers. So another thought, moving on to the third level, we have to talk about design as a skill to create solutions, as process, the transformational experience of design. And now just think about the approach of human-centered design in different frontiers, right? We have talked, and there has been a lot of conversation at the conference about artificial intelligence and the changes that that and other scientific developments are bringing to the provision of care, right? We have precision diagnostics, we have personalized therapeutics, we have, as Jean-Christophe said before, an app where I could enter a few data and they can give me potentially a diagnosis or the likelihood with accuracy of having a next heart attack in the next year, the risk. These solutions are very much in early days, right? Despite the big talk about artificial intelligence, we have only started to see the tip of the iceberg. And a lot of these solutions still need clinical validation. And let's stop for a moment what that means, what huge implication that has for just the roles of traditional roles of in healthcare. What does it mean to be a doctor when in not so long time they diagnose the risk of having an event of any sort can be delivered through data, through an algorithm? What does it mean if the best personalized treatment is suggested also by an algorithm? So these core values, diagnose and treatment, that are like so essential to the figure of a doctor, are not as dependent on a human. So this has the possibility to change the balance of trust between patients, between doctors, also nurses, because the traditional provision of care will change. They a lot of things that a doctor dedicated time to, such as screening through images, etc., that will be basically shortened. This person has a lot more time to dedicate to other things, communicating with patients, coordinating, things that are more core to the work of care. But this means education will need to change, interaction will need to change, and potentially power dynamics. So design and human-centered design needs to be at the forefront of these conversations and these speculations and futures to start redefining those roles and help do that in a way that is actually human-centric and humane. And this, talking about new frontiers for design, basically we're coming back to the basics. We mentioned before that human-centered design is about looking at a problem and just focusing on what is truly important for patients, for the humans around in a certain problem. And this, I want to bring up the topic of this approach being embedded in something as hardcore as drug development. A few years back, we were able to work with the scientific development team for a new medication for the treatment of a type of lupus. Lupus is an autoimmune design that has very, very grave implications across, in time for patients in terms of organ damage and a lot of things, right? So we had the opportunity to deep dive and what the life of the patient is like and what is important for the patient. And we actually, it was simple and made a lot of sense to see that the most important things that surfaced were that actually it was crucially important for people to be able to walk in the sun, to be able to plan for a family. Lupus and certain medication can have effect on the sensitivity to light, on the ability to conceive in women. So when confronting this thinking and this set of priorities with the development teams, it was a bit of a aha moment. They said, the metrics that we have been looking at, like kidney function, hemoglobin levels, etc., actually are reductive. They're reductive. We need to look at things. We need to address aspects, metrics, that are actually reflective of what is truly the desired experience patient need and want, and not what we think traditionally as the clinical indicator should be. So more and more, we had the opportunity to embed this thinking in scientific teams that develop drugs. So human-centered design can ensure that data analytics include holistic data that reflect the person's life's experience. And coming back to what we said before about monitoring the patients, these patient-reported outcomes solutions are prioritized to truly inform what is the real lived experience of patients and feed into how treatments are developed. So in this sense, designers venture into new worlds, new realms of the healthcare system with the goal of making them more humane, more patient-centric. We need to get familiar with an evidence-based approach, with things that traditionally in a designer mindset is less obvious. But this is what needs to happen in order for this approach to have a true impact in, at the end of the day, in patients' lives, right? I would like to finish with a quote from Atul Gawande, who has thought a lot about what it means to care and what is important in terms of healing and keeping life, quality of life. So people have priorities. We have beyond surviving, no matter what, and no matter the state of disease, no matter how serious our condition is or non-serious, there are motives that we want to be here. And whatever these things are, we need to make sure that we don't sacrifice those. And even more, that we enable them. We enable those reasons to live. So I want to thank you for your attention. And now I will welcome your questions.
Thank you, Marta.